She married a millionaire, on a reckless dare, but one night a single file on his desk exposed the price of her love. She married the millionaire as a bet, but when he looked closer, her secret broke his heart. Welcome to Billionaire Stories Untold. If you enjoy deeply emotional stories of redemption and true love, please subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let us dive into the untold story that changed everything. Let us go back to our main character. The ballroom shimmered with champagne lights, laughter echoing beneath a crystal chandelier that felt colder than the snow outside. Daniel Mercer, the kind of man who measured his worth in power and silence, stood at the center of it all, holding a glass of bourbon like a shield. Around him, his friends, men who never had to say please, spoke of money and dares. One of them smirked and said, "You would never marry someone beneath your league, Dan." Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned, eyes scanning the crowd, until they landed on a woman carrying a tray of untouched desserts. Her name tag read Clara Reed, and she was trying to pretend her hands were not shaking. He set the glass down, walked toward her, and with a voice calm enough to silence the room, said, "Marry me. Call it a business arrangement." The tray slipped slightly in her hands. "Excuse me. You heard me," he said, his tone flat but his eyes alive with the thrill of challenge. 30 days. I win a bet. You get security." The crowd laughed, thinking it was another of Daniel's games. But Clara did not laugh. She stared at the man who spoke of marriage as if it were a signature on a contract. "You do not even know me." "That is the point," Daniel replied. "No feelings, no lies, just terms." 3 nights later, Clara sat in a small apartment that smelled faintly of cheap coffee and damp paint. Her sister's medical bills lay scattered across the table like small pieces of a war she could not win. Every beep from the hospital's monitor echoed in her mind. When Daniel's lawyer called to confirm the terms, 1 month of appearances, a signed agreement, full payment up front, she said yes. Not because she wanted the money, but because she was out of time. At his office, a skyline of glass and ambition stretched beyond the window. Daniel flipped through the contract as if it were a quarterly report. "No love, no interference, no staying past 30 days, he read aloud. Clara nodded. "And after that?" He glanced up. "After that, we go back to being strangers." She took a slow breath, pen trembling slightly before touching paper. When she finished signing, Daniel extended his hand. "Welcome to Mercer Holdings, Mrs. Mercer." The title hit her like a wave, foreign, cold, but strangely grounding. 2 days later, Clara stood in front of a mirror inside a penthouse that looked more like a museum than a home. A stylist pinned her hair, adjusted her dress, and whispered, "You are playing the part of a billionaire's wife. Try to breathe." Downstairs, Daniel adjusted his cufflinks, watching her reflection in the mirror behind him. She looked fragile, but her eyes were steady. At the charity gala that evening, every camera turned toward them. Daniel spoke little, his posture sculpted for control, while Clara smiled through nerves she could barely hide. When a journalist asked, "Is this love or PR?" Clara smiled and said softly, "If standing beside someone in silence counts as PR, then yes, it is that." The crowd chuckled politely. Daniel's glance lingered on her, longer than he intended. For the first time, his facade cracked just slightly. That night, when the limo door closed, silence filled the space between them. Rain tapped gently on the glass. Clara looked out at the city lights and whispered, "What happens when the game ends?" Daniel's voice was low, almost tired. Games end, contracts expire, but some things do not. Neither spoke again. The city kept moving, but something between them, something neither could name, had already begun. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of the Mercer penthouse, turning the marble floors into pools of gold. Clara woke to the quiet hum of the city far below, a sound that always reminded her how small she truly was in Daniel's world. Her new life had a scheduled press meetings, photo calls, charity brunches, but she still felt like a visitor trying to play a role she did not audition for. Daniel sat at the dining table reading the financial pages, coffee untouched, expression calm but distant. He looked up briefly when she entered. "We are expected at the board luncheon at noon. Wear something formal." She nodded. "Of course." Her voice sounded polite, practiced. The air between them was neither warm nor cold, it was contractual, like everything else they had agreed upon. Later, in the back seat of the black car, Clara watched the reflection of her own nervous hands in the tinted window. Daniel's driver spoke only once, confirming the destination. Daniel scrolled through his phone, perfectly composed, as if the entire marriage existed only in the space between signatures. At the luncheon, the table glittered with silver and champagne. Someone whispered loud enough for her to hear, "She is the one he married for the bet." Clara's stomach tightened, but she smiled, keeping her eyes fixed on the menu. Daniel noticed. Without looking at her, he said calmly to the group, "Some rumors are just reflections of jealousy." His tone silenced the laughter. It was the first time he had defended her, and something in her chest loosened. After the event, they returned to the penthouse. The sky had turned gray, a quiet rain softening the city skyline. Daniel removed his tie and stood near the window, his reflection overlapping with hers. "You handled that well," he said. "Most people would have walked out." "I could not give them the satisfaction," Clara replied, half smiling. He turned to her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You are stronger than you look." That night, they shared dinner in silence. For the first time, Daniel ate without glancing at his phone. The world outside rumbled with thunder, and a brief power flicker dimmed the chandelier above them. In the low light, Clara caught his face, no arrogance, no control, only exhaustion. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" she asked softly. He looked up. "Every day," he said. The words landed heavier than she expected. When the rain intensified, she found herself standing on the balcony, cold droplets clinging to her bare arms. Daniel stepped out, holding a coat. "You will get sick," he said, placing it gently around her shoulders. She looked at him, searching for the man behind the rules. "Why did you really make that bet?" He hesitated. "Because people expect me to win at everything. I wanted to prove I could still surprise them." "And now?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Now, I am the one surprised." Inside, the power flickered again. A single candle on the table burned steadily, the only light in the room. Neither of them spoke, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the beginning of something real. That night, long after he had gone to his study, Clara opened her laptop. The hospital had sent another reminder about her sister's treatment costs. Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. She closed the computer and pressed her hands to her face, whispering, "Just 30 days. Hold it together." In his office down the hall, Daniel watched the rain slide down the glass. For the first time, the quiet of his own success felt unbearable. He thought about the look in Clara's eyes at dinner, about the strength it took to smile through pity. He did not know her story yet, but he could sense that behind every steady breath, she was fighting a storm. And for reasons he did not understand, he wanted to stand in that storm with her. The following morning began with the quiet rhythm of rain against the penthouse windows. Clara poured coffee into 2 porcelain cups, the faint aroma filling the large, still room. She hesitated before walking toward Daniel's study. He was there, as always, buried behind a desk of polished glass and papers that looked more like shields than work. She set the cup down beside him. "You forgot breakfast," she said softly. He glanced up, eyes tired but alert. "I do not forget," he replied. "I prioritize." She smiled faintly. "Then today, prioritize eating." For a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched into something close to a smile. He lifted the cup, inhaled the steam, and said, "You sound like my assistant. Maybe she just cares," Clara replied. He did not answer, but his eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. Later that afternoon, they attended another public event, a ribbon cutting for one of Daniel's new ventures. Reporters swarmed the entrance, flashing cameras, asking questions that danced between curiosity and cruelty. Clara kept her posture calm, repeating the lines his publicist had taught her. "It is an honor to support the company's mission," she said, voice even. Then a journalist pushed through the crowd and asked, "Mrs. Mercer, do you feel like a trophy wife in this arrangement?" The world seemed to stop. Her throat tightened. Before she could respond, Daniel stepped forward. "She is not a trophy," he said, his tone like steel. "She is my partner for this event, and she deserves respect." The cameras clicked rapidly. The crowd fell silent. Clara felt her heart twist, unsure if the words were real or part of the show. That evening, back at the penthouse, Daniel loosened his tie and exhaled deeply. I should not have let them speak to you that way, he said quietly. You did not have to defend me, she replied, setting her purse on the counter. I wanted to, he said simply. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that neither of them had expected when the contract began. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. The rain had stopped, but thunder lingered in the distance, a reminder of the storm still waiting to break. Clara asked, "Do you ever miss before all this? Before the wealth, the pressure, the expectations?" Daniel stared into his glass. "Sometimes I wonder what I would be if I were not Daniel Mercer. But people like me do not get to wonder for long." She nodded slowly. "People like you still bleed, though." He looked up, surprised by her honesty. "And people like you still hide pain too well," he said. Her hands froze on the table. She wanted to speak, to tell him the truth about her sister, about the hospital bills piling up, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "I should rest. Tomorrow will be long." When she left, Daniel stayed at the table, staring at the half-empty glasses. He had built a life where emotion was weakness, yet tonight he could not shake the image of her quiet strength. He passed her door and saw the faint glow of her laptop. Through the half-open crack, he caught a glimpse of Clara typing something before closing the screen, quickly when she sensed movement. Their eyes met. "Could not sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just finishing some work." He nodded, but he knew there was more. The screen had shown a hospital logo before it went dark. After she closed her door, Daniel returned to his study and sat for a long time, fingers tapping against the desk. He searched her name online, scrolling past gossip headlines until he found a hospital foundation link tied to her hometown. Donations, patient support programs, unpaid invoices, it was all there, in plain sight. The truth began to unfold, and for the first time since this marriage began, Daniel realized the woman he thought he had chosen for a game was the only person in the room who had never been playing. He leaned back in his chair, the rain beginning again outside, and whispered to himself, "What have I done?" The next morning, the city was bright again, but inside the Mercer penthouse, the air felt heavier than the clouds above. Daniel had been awake for hours. The discovery from the night before, the truth about Clara's hospital donations and her sister stayed with him like a weight pressing against his chest. He poured black coffee into a mug and stood by the window, watching the endless stream of cars below. Clara walked in quietly, her hair tied back, dressed simply, without the elegance that the tabloids demanded. "You are up early," she said, trying to sound casual. "I could not sleep," he replied. His voice was even, but his mind was chaos. "We have the investor dinner tonight. The press will be there." "I will be ready," she said. He turned toward her, studying her face as if it might tell him what she had been hiding all along. "Clara," he said carefully, "if you ever need something, anything, you can tell me." Her eyes flickered, then softened. "Thank you, but some things are not meant to be shared." He nodded slowly, though his chest ached at the wall she kept between them. That night, the investor dinner glowed with golden light and sharp laughter. Clara stood beside Daniel, smiling when expected, listening when necessary. She was graceful, but her mind was somewhere else. She checked her phone beneath the table every few minutes, waiting for a message that never came. When the dinner ended, a photographer caught a flash of her worried expression. The next morning, headlines screamed, "Mercer's wife distracted rumors of trouble behind the glamour." Daniel threw the newspaper aside, anger flashing across his face. "They have no idea what they are talking about." Clara sighed, rubbing her temples. "Let them talk. The month is almost over. Soon, none of this will matter." But her tone cracked at the end, and Daniel heard it. "You really believe that?" he asked quietly. She looked away. "It is what we agreed on." That evening, the silence in the penthouse was unbearable. Daniel found her on the balcony again, the same place she always went when she needed to breathe. The sky was the color of bruised steel, and wind tugged at her dress. "You should come inside," he said, stepping out. "I like the cold," she replied. "It makes me feel awake." He moved closer. "You do not have to face everything alone." Her voice trembled. "You say that like you know what I am facing." He hesitated, then told her what he had found. "I saw the hospital files, Clara. I know about your sister." Her breath caught. She turned sharply, tears forming before she could hide them. You had no right. I know, he said, guilt heavy in every word. But I could not just stand by while you were breaking yourself to save someone else. Her voice shook, soft but firm. This was never about saving myself. I took your deal because she needed me alive, not because I wanted your money. You think you know everything, but you do not understand what desperation looks like. He took a slow step forward. Then help me understand. For a moment, the only sound was the wind between them. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time without fear or pretense. I never wanted to be part of your bet, she whispered. But I needed to survive. I thought you were just a man who wanted control. I never thought you could care. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. I did not think I could either. She blinked, uncertain if she had heard him right. He turned away first, gripping the railing as if it could keep him steady. Tomorrow I will cancel every appearance. You do not owe me another day of pretending. Her hand trembled at her side. And what if I am not pretending anymore? He froze, eyes wide. But before he could speak, her phone rang. She answered, her voice breaking into a sob. It is the hospital. The world around them went still. Daniel reached for her shoulder, and she did not pull away. For the first time, their silence felt like a promise fragile, trembling, and real. The following hours passed in a blur of rain and fear. Daniel drove through the city without saying a word, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Beside him, Clara sat motionless, phone clutched tightly in her hand. The hospital had called her sister, Eva, had taken a turn for the worse. When they arrived, the fluorescent hallway lights hummed above them, harsh and cold. Clara ran ahead, her heels echoing against the tile. Daniel followed quietly, stopping at the doorway as Clara leaned over her sister's bed. Eva's skin was pale, her breathing shallow but steady. Machines beeped in rhythm, the only proof that she was still holding on. A nurse adjusted the monitors and whispered, "She has been waiting for you." Then she left them alone. Clara sat, gripping her sister's hand. "I am here, Ava. You just have to stay with me, please." Her voice cracked with exhaustion. Daniel stood at the window, unsure where he belonged in this scene. He had seen boardrooms collapse and markets crash, but nothing prepared him for this kind of quiet pain. When Clara finally turned toward him, her eyes were red but steady. "I should not have brought you here," she said softly. "This is not your world." He shook his head. "It is, if you are in it." The words slipped out before he could stop them. She stared at him for a long moment, unable to reply. Hours later, Eva drifted back to sleep, and the nurse urged Clara to rest. Daniel waited, in the corridor, sitting beside a vending machine, humming softly in the corner. When Clara walked out, she looked smaller, fragile in the oversized hospital light. "You should go home," she whispered. "You have done enough." "I am not leaving you here," he said firmly. She sat beside him, sighing. "You are not responsible for me, Daniel." He turned toward her. "Maybe not, but I want to be." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The world outside the windows was washed in gray, but inside, the air felt strangely still, like something important was changing quietly. When morning came, Daniel drove her back to the penthouse. Neither said a word, but the silence between them was no longer cold. It was full of unspoken understanding. Later that day, Daniel's board members gathered for an emergency meeting. News had leaked that their contract marriage might have been a publicity stunt. Investors were nervous. One of them sneered. "You are letting that woman ruin your image." Daniel's gaze sharpened. "That woman has more integrity than anyone in this room." His voice was steady, commanding. "The next person who questions her will answer directly to me." The room went silent. For the first time, Daniel Mercer had chosen someone over the company. When he returned home, he found Clara on the couch, half asleep, wrapped in a blanket. She woke as he set a bag of takeout on the table. "You missed dinner," he said. Her smile was faint. "You do not cook, do you?" "Not well," he admitted, sitting across from her. They ate in quiet companionship, the soft rustle of takeout boxes the only sound between them. When she looked up, she noticed something new in his eyes, no arrogance, no mask, only warmth. "I do not understand you," she said quietly. "You started all this with a bet." "I know," he replied, "but I am not the same man who made it." Outside, the city lights shimmered against the rain. She watched him, torn between fear and hope. When this contract ends, what happens to us? He hesitated, then said softly, maybe it already ended the moment I stopped pretending. She looked down, unable to stop the tears that gathered in her eyes. Daniel, she began, but before she could finish, his phone rang. He frowned, answered, and his expression darkened. The voice on the other end said, someone leaked the original bet to the press. The storm that had been waiting finally arrived. The headline exploded across every digital screen within hours. The Mercer marriage was a bet sources confirmed scandal inside the empire. The world that Daniel had built on control and silence began to crumble with a single article. The photograph showed him at the gala, whispering to a friend, with the cruel caption, a bet worth $1 million. By the time Clara saw it, the story had already spread everywhere. Her phone buzzed endlessly with messages she did not read. Her face had gone pale, her hands shaking. She stood in the middle of the living room, the contract that once felt like armor now burning in her mind like a brand of humiliation. When Daniel entered the penthouse, she turned to face him, tears already welling in her eyes. Tell me it is not true, she whispered. He froze. Clara, listen to me. Was I just another one of your games? Her voice broke. Did you really marry me to prove something to them? Daniel's throat tightened. It started that way, yes, but it is not what it became. You have to believe that. She shook her head, her voice trembling with anger. Believe what? That somehow I was supposed to thank you for using me. The silence between them was unbearable. Daniel took a hesitant step forward, but she backed away. You were the only real thing I have had in years, he said quietly. Everything changed when I met you. Her tears fell freely now. It is too late for that. She turned, grabbed her coat, and walked to the elevator without another word. Daniel followed, but the doors closed before he reached her. He stood staring at his reflection in the mirrored wall, seeing a man he no longer recognized. That night, the media storm worsened. Investors withdrew, his company's stock fell, and public relations demanded statements he refused to give. In the chaos, Daniel drove to the hospital, desperate to find Clara, but her sister's bed was empty. The nurse told him softly. She passed away early this morning. Mrs. Mercer left before dawn. The world seemed to tilt. He leaned against the wall, the weight of guilt pressing down on him until breathing felt like punishment. The woman who had taught him to feel again was gone, carrying a grief he had never helped her bear. For days, Daniel disappeared from the public eye. Reporters called him the fallen billionaire, and his board demanded his resignation. But none of it mattered. He had lost the only thing that made his empire mean something. A week later, a courier arrived at the penthouse with a single envelope. Inside was the wedding ring he had given Clara, simple, silver, without diamonds. There was a note in her handwriting. You once said everything between us had terms. This is my last one. Learn to be kind without expecting anything in return. Daniel closed his eyes, holding the ring in his palm. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to lose not power, but forgiveness. That evening, he went to his office and stared at the wall of photos from his career awards, contracts, smiling faces that now looked hollow. Slowly, he removed them one by one until the wall was bare. In the silence, he whispered, You were never the bet, Clara. I was. Outside, the city lights flickered across the glass, but inside, Daniel Mercer sat alone, stripped of his empire, his pride, and the woman who had taught him the meaning of love he had never deserved. The story was not over, but for the first time, Daniel realized that redemption does not begin with winning. It begins with loss. The deepest secrets are about to change everything. Subscribe now to catch the dramatic twist that is coming in the next chapter. 2 months passed. The headlines had faded, but Daniel's name still lingered like a shadow over every conversation in the city. The Mercer empire had survived, but its owner had disappeared from public sight. The penthouse stood quiet, stripped of everything that once symbolized power. The only thing that remained was the silver ring sitting on his desk. Daniel spent his days rebuilding what he had destroyed, not his company, but himself. He sold his yacht, shut down the luxury branches that had been his pride, and started a new foundation under Clara's sister's name, the Eva Hope Fund. It was the first time his money felt like it belonged somewhere honest. One gray morning, he drove out of the city. The world beyond the glass towers was softer, quieter, and far more human. He found himself standing before a small community clinic with the name Hope Center etched on the sign. Inside, volunteers bustled with purpose, handing out meals and medicine. A woman greeted him with a kind smile. "You are here to volunteer?" He nodded. "If you will have me." The work was simple, organizing donations, painting walls, serving soup, but it grounded him in a way no boardroom ever had. Each day he stayed longer, each night he left later. The people there did not care about his name or his mistakes. They only cared that he showed up. One evening, as he locked up the clinic, he noticed a small flower pressed between the pages of a donation ledger. The handwriting below it was familiar, for those still trying. He stared at it for a long time, his heart tightening. Clara's handwriting. The next day, he returned earlier, asking quietly, "Who left this?" The receptionist smiled. "A woman came by last week. She said she used to know you." Daniel felt the air leave his chest. "Did she leave an address?" The woman shook her head. "Only this." She handed him a folded flyer for a charity art exhibit, Hearts Unbet, stories of resilience set to open that weekend. Daniel stood there, the paper trembling in his hand. The title alone was enough. He knew it could only be her. That night, as he sat in the dim light of the penthouse, he turned the ring over in his hand and whispered, "If there is a chance you are still out there, I will find you." He had once made a bet for pride. Now, he was ready to fight for forgiveness. Saturday arrived beneath a pale spring sky. The city was alive again, humming with noise and light, but Daniel felt every heartbeat like it carried a question. He held the invitation to the Hearts Unbet exhibit, its edges worn from being read too many times. For weeks, he had prepared himself for the possibility that she would not be there, but his heart refused to believe it. The gallery was held in a renovated warehouse near the river. Soft music floated through the open space, and photographs lined the walls, each one capturing acts of kindness and survival. In the center hung a large portrait of two clasped hands beneath the words, "Love is not a contract. It is a choice." Daniel moved slowly, his footsteps echoing against the polished floor. The entire exhibit carried Clara's spirit, her compassion, her quiet strength. At the far corner, a small placard read, "Curated by Clara Reed." His chest tightened. She was here. He turned, scanning the crowd until he saw her near the window. She wore a simple gray dress, her hair shorter now, her face calm but older in the way grief makes people wise. For a long moment, Daniel could not move. When she finally noticed him, her expression froze. The room seemed to fade around them. He walked closer, every step heavy with the weight of everything. "And," he had never said. "Clara," he whispered. "Daniel," she said softly, "you should not be here. Then why did you leave me a trail?" He held up the invitation, his voice breaking. "The foundation, the note, this exhibit you wanted me to find you." She looked down, fingers tightening around the edge of a frame. "I wanted you to understand. Love is not about fixing someone, it is about letting them become better." He took a step closer, his voice trembling. "Then let me show you who I have become. I sold everything that was built on lies. The Eva Fund now helps hundreds of families. It was never charity. It was a promise to you, to her." Her eyes glistened, but she shook her head gently. "Daniel, I do not know if I can go back." He reached into his pocket and opened his palm. The silver ring rested there, gleaming beneath the warm light. "Then, let us not go back," he said. "Let us start again." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she placed her hand over his. The air between them felt different, no longer full of hurt, but of hope. A single tear escaped down her cheek as she whispered, "You kept it. I never stopped keeping it," Daniel said quietly. "Or you." Around them, the exhibit lights dimmed slightly, and the crowd began to applaud for the evening's closing speech. But for Daniel and Clara, the noise faded into silence. It was no longer about redemption or reputation. It was about two people finally ready to begin something real without conditions, without fear, and without any contract to define it. The following evening, the city glowed beneath a calm sky. The Hearts Unbet exhibit had ended, but its message lingered in every heart that had entered. Daniel waited outside the gallery, unsure if Clara would appear again. He stood beneath a single streetlight, holding the same silver ring that had once begun everything. When the doors opened, Clara stepped out, the soft wind catching her hair. She stopped when she saw him, her expression unreadable. You waited, she said quietly. I have waited every day since you left, Daniel replied. But tonight, I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for a beginning. She walked closer, her footsteps slow but steady. A beginning built on what, Daniel? There is no contract this time, no promise of forever. Built on truth, he said, his voice low but certain. The truth that I love you, not because of what you gave me, but because you taught me how to give. Her eyes softened, and the tension that had once defined them finally dissolved. She looked down at the ring in his hand. That was the symbol of everything false, she whispered. He nodded. Then let it become the symbol of everything real. Daniel knelt, not with pride or spectacle, but with quiet honesty. Marry me again, he said. No bets, no audience, just us. The night air stilled. For a long time, Clara said nothing. Then she reached down, touching his cheek. You do not have to prove anything anymore, she said gently. I am not proving, he whispered. I am choosing. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she extended her hand. Then I am choosing too. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, the same ring that had once been meaningless. Now it shone like a promise redeemed. Around them, the hum of the city grew softer, as if even the world wanted to listen. Months later, a quiet wedding was held at the Hope Center, the same place Daniel had first learned how to serve others. There were no cameras, no reporters, only a few volunteers, and the sound of soft piano music. As they exchanged vows, Daniel said, This time, I do not want a perfect life. I only want a true one with you. Clara smiled through her tears. Then let us live it honestly, one day at a time. When they kissed, sunlight spilled through the windows, washing over the guests and the deste, walls adorned with photos from the Foundation's new projects. The sign at the entrance now read, The Eva Hope Center, founded by Daniel and Clara Mercer. Their story had begun with a bet, but ended with a promise, the kind of promise that no contract could ever define. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.